Hi, this is Suhailah, and this is Grow With Me by Suhailah, the podcast. And this is episode 7, and this episode is called Into the Depths. And this is going to be part 1 of a 4-part series. The name of the series is called Wade in the Water, Roadmap to Healing with my energy healer, Kim. This is part 1. We're going to have part 1, 2, 3, and 4, starting with this one, episode 7, which is considered part 1. Episode 8, 9, and 10 will be parts 2, 3, and 4 of this series. I'm going to release them weekly for the entire month of July. So I'm going to go a little bit off of my podcast schedule. I normally release my podcast every other week, twice a month, give or take a few days. But I thought the information that Kim, my healer, shared, the insight she shared, the tools she gave, the conversation we had, I thought it was so timely and so important for the times we live in, whether you're dealing with business or personal life or professional life or just yourself and the world around you. I thought the information was so useful that I want to release them sooner, and I wanted to make a series out of it. So I cut it up into 4 episodes. So you'll have 4. So hopefully you'll follow. You'll subscribe so you can catch the whole thing, the whole conversation. So it happened in one sitting, but we touched on so much. Kim is a healer. She is an energy healer. She is a trauma healer. She is a coach. She helps you navigate life. She has helped me navigate some of the toughest and most pivotal and what wound up being some of the most transformational moments of my life the past few years, beginning with health, a spine issue. I talked about her in the last episode, Feeling the Feelings. I also talked about her in one of the previous episodes on anxiety, because when I had panic and anxiety attacks, she helped me. She gave me tools to help navigate it. And I shared some of those tools in one of the previous episodes. I think it was 3 or 4. But in this episode, Kim, she's my first guest. Kim was the first person I asked to be a guest. The only person I had in mind originally to be a guest when I knew it was time to launch this podcast and time to create this podcast. She said yes immediately, but it took us a minute to get our schedules together. But we finally did. And the conversation was enlightening, even for me, even though I know her and I've worked with her for a lot of years now. We touched on so much. She explained what energy psychology is. We talked about what healing is, what trauma is. We talked about the importance of hope, which is a big thing for me. I always want to provide people with hope in all the work that I do. We talked about personal growth and emotional well-being and spiritual journeys and self-discovery. We talked about mental health and why change can be so scary. We talked about unnecessary suffering, which is Kim's forte. This is what her mission is, to alleviate suffering. And we wound up discovering through this conversation that that's both of our missions. I have that in writing in places that I want to alleviate suffering. I don't want people to suffer so much. And it seems unlikely in my primary business because I do brand development and marketing and business development. I'm essentially a businesswoman and an entrepreneur. So alleviating suffering seems unlikely in the work that I do, but I don't think so. And I've seen the connection for years, which is why, because I work with individuals, I've built teams, I've built offices, I have been managed by people, I've been supervised by people, I have managed people, and I have supervised and led people. So I know where trauma shows up in myself, and I can see where it shows up in others. So I have seen the connection, and I know how important self-development work is in this work, in business, and just in life because of these things. So I've seen the connection for a long time, which is why I created Awaken the Brand, my book, and Awaken the Brand, my course, where I merge personal development and business development powered by spiritual intelligence is how I frame it. But we touched on that a little bit here, the role of healing and trauma in building a brand, or the way it can become an obstacle in business and brand building and all the aspects of life that I touched on, personal, professional, and all these things. We had a moment where we talked about business in particular and brand building in particular and how my work informs it. And it was insightful even for me that she can see the connection. So I wanted to take a moment to introduce a new mini course I have, and it's called Feminine Leadership, Leading from the Inside Out. It's a mini course. It's a 7-day immersion. It's a self-guided leadership journey. And it was actually created originally in 2017, so almost 10 years ago. And I created it for the 4 A's. I was asked to create something on leadership at the time. And it was a webinar at the time, and I presented 2 ideas, something on, traditional like account management and marketing and strategy. And then I presented this as a second idea, this idea of feminine leadership, leading from the inside out. And it's something that I pulled out of thin air, if you will, or I guess I pulled it outside from inside of myself, no pun intended. But it was a way that I was learning how to lead, that I knew I had to start to lead with. It felt no more natural to me because everything else felt sort of just cruel and unnatural. And we can see now, looking at the world around us, how important it is for good leadership. So I thought it was a perfect time to introduce this course. I'm going to link it below. At the time, I presented it to the 4A's is a trade organization, and they service around 600 marketing and advertising agencies across 1,200 offices. So I presented it to that group. But I found that presentation. I created this mini course. So maybe you'll like it. If it resonates with you, check it out or pass it on to someone else. And that's all. So I want to just say, I also noticed that there were some sound issues here. Kim and I, we noticed it when we were recording, so bear with us. It was a new app I used. So if you hear that, just know that we're aware of it, and I will do better next time with my next guest. And I also just want to read a quick disclaimer, which is the content of this podcast is for information and inspirational purposes only. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or replace professional, medical, psychological, or therapeutic advice. Always seek support from a qualified professional for any mental health or medical concerns. The views shared are personal and do not represent any official or clinical guidance. So with that being said, let's get into it. Let's get into the depths, which is the name of this one, part 1. Thank you for being here. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Hello. So I'm so excited this week. I'm so excited for this podcast because if anyone listening to this one has read any of my newsletters, even my book, anything that I have out in the world right now, you probably would have heard me talk about Kim, my healer, or write about Kim, my healer. She has been so pivotal in so many moments in my life, particularly the past 5 or 6 years, or since 2019, really, when I had my first session with her. And I talked about Kim in my last episode 6, and it was called Feeling the Feeling. And I talked about how I was having a spine issue, and I just didn't know what was going on with me. And my friend Rita gifted me with the session. And if you haven't listened to that episode, you should go back and listen to it. I think it's funny and it's a good episode. But I talked about how Kim was the first person who really made me realize, I don't think she used these words at the time, but I was spiritually bypassing. I was using meditation. I was using all these things for years and years and years, thinking that I understood intellectually what healing was, but I was not actually feeling my feelings. So that was one of the pivotal moments in my life more recently that I talked about in the last podcast episode. But I now finally have her on because I want Kim to talk about what she does. I want to offer people just an understanding of the different tools, modalities, whatever you want to call them, that we can use on our own or with someone like a Kim, when we're on this healing journey. And like I said in the last episodes, I didn't know I was on a healing journey. I was just up against myself. You start facing these things and you're like, what is going on with me? Sometimes you realize you're the common denominator, or sometimes you think it's someone else's problem, but it all comes back to you. So I'm always committed in my work, my newsletter, my podcast, my book, everything I'm doing now and moving forward, to not only give people new understandings of what things are and what is available for them, but I also like to stand in it with people. So I often, like I said in my last episode, I don't tell stories for entertainment's sake. I don't tell it for entertainment value, for humor, to talk shit about people. I stand in it so people can understand that I've been here too. I've gone through this. I didn't know what the hell was going on with me a lot of times. And thankfully, I've been surrounded by such amazing people that always a resource pops up. Either I've investigated on my own, or someone like my friend Rita, who gifted me with my first session with Kim, they tell me, try this thing. And then that sets me on my path that has become a healing journey. So for a long time, I thought the spiritual journey and the healing journey were one and the same. And I'm not saying they're not related, but the tools we use are quite different, especially when it comes to confronting trauma and things of this nature. So I wanted to have Kim on. I'm so excited. Kim is my healer, Kimberly, but I call her Kim, and she's here. I finally have her as a guest. She's my first guest. I'm so excited. I'm always committed, like I said, to give people tools, so understanding and then tools. I know a lot of people do therapy now of the past few years, specifically since COVID. We have better help and all these cheaper and inexpensive ways to get therapy. So mental therapy, you have art therapy. People do sound healing. People do all kinds of stuff. But I wanted Kim to talk a little bit about what she does specifically, what kind of healing she does. And then I have a couple questions we're going to talk about. So Kim, I want you to introduce yourself. Tell people what you do. And wait, let me just say, whoever's listening here, right before this, Kim and I had a little bit of a test session. And I said to Kim, okay, I'm going to ask you to tell people what you do. And she says, what do I do? It's such a gift. And I'm the kind of person, I don't shoot the messenger. It could be a rock talking to me. It could be a plant. It could be the sky. It could be lightning. It could be the Bible. It could be the Quran. It does not matter to me. If it feels right and it resonates, I'm going to follow through with this. So I've never asked lots of questions to Kim. I just know it works. So to me, if I have the proof, if I feel better after, if I have a new understanding, if I'm given some tools to work with, I'm going to keep going with that path and that person. And Kim is one of these people. So I don't know if she can explain what she does exactly, because when you're gifted like this, you just do it. But Kim, let's get into it. What do you do? So I say, Kim is a healer. That's usually what I say. And then more recently, when I refer you to friends and people throughout the years, and they say, what does she do? I say energy psychologist, because I asked you once, and that's how you summed it up. So I don't know how you want to approach that answer, but
I'm not a just to be clear, I'm not a psychologist, and this isn't therapy, but it's the closest thing I found is energy psychology, because we deal with a lot of emotions and belief systems. So it's not like Reiki. But what I do versus how I do it is I use my insight and my intuition to help usually ambitious, really overachieving women overcome chronic suffering so that they can create their ideal life and experience joy. And a lot of times for the first time.
Am I an overambitious woman? I didn't know you did that. Go ahead.
I think you might fit the mold.
I think I am.
You might fit the mold. And so that's really in a nutshell. Is it okay if I talk about where I come from?
Yeah.
Okay. So I come from a very chaotic household. My parents are awesome, really great, loving parents, all of that, thank God. Or I don't know what would have happened to me, because when I was 5, my dad had a plane accident. He was a crop duster, and he had a very serious plane accident that left him missing half of his frontal lobe. And also
of his brain, you mean?
Of his brain, sorry. Yes. He had a severe brain damage. He had a, TBI, as they call it, traumatic brain injury. And it threw my mother, who was a stay-at-home mom, into needing to become the breadwinner overnight. She was not only basically a single mother at that point, which she kind of was before, because my dad worked all the time, but in the sense of now she had to go to work, and she was responsible for this person who had no short-term memory anymore, was in such chronic, serious pain, and he immediately became an alcoholic. So I was often left, there were hours as a 5-year-old, 5, 6, whatever, going on, that I was left taking care of him, caretaking him. To no fault of anybody's. Listen, it was 1980. There was no therapy. There was no help. There was no, this just wasn't what it was. Situational. It's what it was. But it was, it was very traumatic. It was very traumatic. And so I also had an older sister who was 13 years older, and she was a type 1 diabetic, and she was just the poster child for very bad care. And she moved out pretty early, so I was basically raised as an only child in that situation. And then she ended up going blind when I was 13, and she was 26. She came home to try to fix her eyes. Her retinas were detaching from the diabetes, and she ended up going blind. And then she ended up having a stroke at 35. because she ended up in an abusive relationship and her husband actually tried to kill her. And then my mother started caretaking her, and she died at 40. And, you know, it was just a long series of stuff. So my life was a series of trauma. And I could never, which I didn't know at the time. I didn't have that language, I guess, is what I'm trying to say at the time. Yeah. And so, and again, early, 80s was kind of the beginning of therapy, but it was still like stigmatized. My dad went to therapy, but even his therapist was never like, hey, you and your daughter and the wife, everybody should be in therapy. It was like he went to therapy because he had this traumatic brain injury. There just wasn't really any help. There wasn't any language. We didn't even use the word anxiety at that point in society and modern vernacular kind of thing. And so I had these series of traumas, and I just couldn't recuperate. And I didn't understand that my nervous system, I didn't know anything about our nervous system, let alone the fact that it was dysregulated. And it wasn't until I moved away from home. I'm from Bakersfield, and I moved to San Francisco. And during that time, I had a friend of mine die, and I just went through this whole process of, it just was too much. It was like the straw, basically, that broke the camel's back. And through that is basically how I found this work. I did go to talk therapy, and at the time that really wasn't working for me because it's not what I needed at that time. They weren't giving me any tools. They weren't helping me shift anything. And I could talk about what was happening to me freely because I was so disassociative and so desensitized. So it wasn't, some people need to speak about, we all need to speak about our things, but some people that's enough to create a shift because it's such a big deal to be able to speak because they have no one that can hold that kind of space for them. And that is vitally important in healing. But that wasn't my problem. So it just, for me, I was like, I don't know, man, I can't, like, this isn't really doing much. And I also was having a spiritual awakening in the sense of when my friend died, I could see her everywhere. And I thought I was having a psychotic break. And then one day, an acquaintance of mine, a roommate's friend, was over, and she could see her too. And that's when I realized maybe I'm not crazy because, we don't usually share psychosis. So that's when I started, okay, I need to get this under control, and I need to learn, like, if this is real, how to control it and what I'm supposed to do with it. And then I just started studying everything. I studied Reiki, I studied channeling, I studied mediumship, I studied with healers that had no modality, just, had a reputation that fell into my lap, and theta healing and SRT, and I don't know, like, if you name it, I probably have studied it. And it wasn't until I got into the energetic psychology type trainings and experience that's when I realized immediately, oh, this is what I'm meant to do.
Wow.
And through this journey, I figured out that my purpose, which may change at some point, but I really feel like my purpose is to alleviate unnecessary suffering. Some suffering is that, like, life is life. We're going to suffer. Things are going to happen. Every relationship is going to end one way or the other. Somebody's, it just is a fact. If nothing else, through death, right? And so suffering happens. Tragedy happens. But I do believe there's a lot of unnecessary suffering because we don't have tools, because our society doesn't want us to feel things because it's inconvenient, because we medicate and disassociate, and we don't have good modeling. And that causes, like I said, a lot of unnecessary suffering.
Wow. It's so funny. I'm hearing, I know a lot of your, parts of your life story, but I learned some new things about you just now. It's amazing and it's fascinating, and definitely were born to do this. Literally, you put in the environments that made you have to do this work and come about this work. And it's so funny because my intention too, I say this a lot on my business work, that I want to alleviate suffering as well, but I do it in such a different way. Obviously, it seems disconnected to brand work, but I
don't think it's disconnected at all. And we can get into that if you want as we talk. But I think it's 100% connected because of the work brand work for me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like there's so much in being seen, and you can't be seen without doing this work, and you can't heal without being seen.
I love that. I keep it's all combined to me, but this part, grow with me. I don't think I've ever talked too much about what I actually do, although it's written in the description of each episode. But yeah, so I'm a marketer, and I build brands and I market brands. And yeah, that's literally, I love how you put it, Kim, because when I created my course, which I have a 7-week course called Awaken the Brand by Suhailah, I wanted to go back. I think I might have spoken to you about it, but I haven't done it yet. I want to go back and insert a module just on healing, how important healing is when you're building, because in my experience, when I'm building my career, even before I had my own business, which is now, it just turned 12 years this month, but even before that, when I was in corporate America, you're always faced with things. You have to face yourself a lot, right? You get, I remember the first time I had my first corner office, quote unquote. It wasn't even a real corner office, but it was tiny. But you have all the things. You have all the things. You think you reached it. I have my Mercedes. I have my office. I have, but I'm miserable. You keep reaching for these things. You're like, okay, well, this didn't fill me up, and this didn't fill me up, and this didn't fill me up, and I still don't feel better. You're putting all these Band-Aids. So that's different than spiritual bypassing, but it's another kind of bypassing, right? But it's through my work and my career. To me, I always say my spiritual path and my business and career path, they're completely side by side. They were parallel paths. They fed each other. Every time I hit an obstacle in work, I wanted to understand how to deal with myself better or deal with people better. And then vice versa. So they're intertwined. And this is why I did my course. And then my book, Awaken the Brand by Suhailah, came from that. And the way I describe brand in my course and my book is a brand is a promise, right? Because I'm now working more with founders, individuals, right? When I work with bigger brands.
I love that. A brand is a promise. I say a brand is a promise. And that's what I started to realize, because when I work with big brands like a Coca-Cola, there's no person behind it anymore, right? Right.
When I started working with like a Guinness beer. That's Arthur Guinness was an actual man. And when you start to understand why he did what he did, you're like, oh, he really had a mission. And it's really astounding when you see someone who has a brand that's 100 years old. It doesn't even belong to the family anymore sometimes. But you can still see those principles still somehow live. Or you assume they're the same principles if they feel good. Same thing with Don Julio Tequila. 1942, I talk about this all the time. Don Julio created the squat bottle of tequila because he wanted to see across the table at his family. He wanted to look at his family across the table. So there was no, how we see tequila bottles now, and I don't drink alcohol, but I market a lot of liquor brands. But when you see that squat tequila bottle that everyone knows is usually small and round, they used to be long. So the 1942, and this is not a brand plug, and who knows, I may edit this part out, but this is 1942 is a tall bottle, Don Julio. But
right.
That's how they used to be. He created the squat one because he wanted to look across the table at his family. That's somebody rooted in values, right?
Yeah.
So when I started to work with founders or companies, brands who are founders, even if they are dead, specifically with liquor, I started to have to connect more with that founder story because I don't drink the product, right? Not that that's a prerequisite. They can't tell you have to drink it, but I always have to find this backstory, right? So this backstory for me to build strategy and build exciting things and, events. And I have to really believe in that person for me as a marketer. I know most people, but that's been my way. So I wind up falling in love with the founder, right? On some way, even if they're dead, or the idea of them. So that started when I moved to LA. I started meeting individuals. They had a company. They had I had one client who's an actress, and maybe she has a podcast, and she also has a TV show, and she has a T-shirt line, but she didn't know how to wrap it up in a brand. But she's a founder, so now I can get into her story and help her connect that with everything she does in the form of a business and brand. So I started to really say a brand is a promise, because you think of Apple, these brands that we know Apple is glitchy. We know every time they're going to release a product, it's going to be glitchy. If you're Apple, you know this. Kim, you don't have an Apple, so you can't speak to
I do too. I'm all Apple.
You do?
You call me out. I'm all Apple.
No, you're not. When I text you, it's green. It's not blue.
No, it's because my phone's glitchy. I have an iPhone and it is glitchy and only like half of it. I'm only green for like half the people. It's not even across the board.
But my point is,
To your point,
I always use Apple as a good example because they deliver on their promise. It doesn't even matter what product they're releasing anymore, right? We're going to line up for that product. You're going to get it. You're going to bear with the glitches for the first 6 weeks. You're going to keep upgrading that software and you're going to keep standing in line. Why? Because they deliver on innovation. You always know it's going to be shiny and new. There's just certain things. There's a certain promise, whether you understand it or not, that's there. And we buy into that promise, even if they miss the mark. we trust them so much. So it builds trust when you know, and then you see it. Obviously, it's a beautiful product. It's pretty. The stores are fabulous.
I was going to say also part of their promise is status.
Yeah, exactly.
Status and yes,
exactly. So I always say that when I'm in the airport, if I'm sitting and waiting for my plane at the gate, and I have my Apple computer out, and I see somebody over there with whatever is not an Apple, a Dell, or whatever they are. You literally start making assumptions about that person.
Yeah.
You think, oh, they're accountant. You think they're not creative.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, there's also the promise of creativity with Apple.
Yep. You just, so it is all of that. It's the status. It's, okay. That's why I started to come to this conclusion that a brand is a promise. And also when I work with nonprofits, it's easier to see that's, even if they can't see it, you're offering a promise. But it comes in handy now that I work with individuals and smaller entities in terms of the size of the company, the size of the brand. But what I started to see is that when I'm working with individuals, so much of what I do becomes therapy sessions, right? Because one of my first series of questions is in my book, Awaken the Brand. I say, who are you, right? Who are you? Why do you exist? What are you here to do? Most people can't answer those questions, right? And then also I see a lot of times that even when people are paying me well, they won't do the work that they need to do to move their brand forward, which is why I wanted to introduce a module in my course on this, because I feel like they come up against themselves. I have people be afraid. I literally have people be afraid to want people to know that they're a Black founder. I have a friend who has a tech startup. She doesn't want people to know she's a Black founder, right? Mm-hmm. Right? She wants them to believe she's a white person or not even know what she is. I'm telling her that's trauma, right? Because it's real. It's real. In her kind of business, they are likely to deal with someone if they knew it was a white person. That's just the world we live. But how amazing would it be for people to know there's a Black woman behind this, right? Mm-hmm. And I think there's a line like, okay, what is the trauma that the world has inflicted on us, where we're afraid to even show our faces or use our voices? Like you were saying, you have to know who you are, right? If you're building a brand, especially when it's a personal brand. So it's cool what I get to do now, because even if they don't have a physical product and they just want to be a personal brand, like you were saying, like out in the world, you have to really know who you are and heal that trauma, right? To be able to do that, to face the world, to be yourself, to be authentic, all these things. But if you are a person who happens to have a physical brand as well, it's even better. Because what I do is I connect the two. I connect the person with the product. Because they're less likely to walk away from their own product when they are very deeply connected to it. When they can say, these are my values, and then this is what my product stands for, right? Mm-hmm. Even if it seems unlikely, like a sneaker line or a lipstick line. I want to make people feel beautiful or make them feel powerful or make them feel themselves and wear this lipstick and feel empowered. It's still coming from a values place, right? But you still have to stand in your power and get past your trauma to be able to do that and to be able to lead. So it is all connected. And so, but I do say often, because of the process of my work and also of who I am, I do want people to just not have to suffer so much. If I can alleviate suffering in this world through what I do. And when I started saying that, I didn't have things like this podcast. I didn't have things like my newsletter, but that is my intention as well. I feel like if people have hope, because for me, in my darkest moments, when I have had hope, that's what you were for me, Kim. When Rita offered that session to me when I needed it during that spine issue that I had, that I talked about in the last episode, it was just the hope that something can help. Sometimes we just need the hope. You don't even know if it's going to help, but just something to look forward to. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's what all this work is. When I discover something new, it's like, okay, well, maybe this, But I think there is a fine line between like becoming so hyper vigilant with fixing. And I also say it's not about fixing ourselves. It's about bringing ourselves back to wholeness, identifying those hidden parts. So I would love, I know we had a few questions we talked about before we got on this call that we said we're going to run through. And I do want to go through those. But I would love to know, because you talked about understanding your own trauma. Well, how do you define trauma and how do you define healing?
Well, so those are really complex questions, and I think you can find many answers to that, like backed by research or, from different perspectives from different authorities. And I will say, from the research I've done and my experience and all that, the trauma is a dysregulated nervous system. And the psychological effects are a symptom of that dysregulated nervous system. I think for a long time we thought that trauma was in our head, like the psychological effects were first and then the body responded. But all the evidence is actually pointing more towards it starts in the body and the psychological effects are second.
So when you say you use your insight and intuition, what does that mean? So is this the how you do what you do?
Yeah. I mean, I actually don't know any intuitive that can explain how they do what they do, to be honest. I can tell you that what I do is I connect to my client's energy, and I receive most of my information through feeling in my own body. So I'm able to connect to my client's energy. I can feel what is up, what's present and up and wanting to be dealt with. And then both the client and I work together to move that energy. And sometimes the client doesn't understand they're helping, but they really are. So we work together to move out that energy, because I can't do anything that the client doesn't want done on all levels. So if there's some resistance, that energy, even if consciously they want it to go, if there's some resistance there, it's not going anywhere. So we got to figure that out. And so we work together to help the client move energy that isn't serving them any longer. And when I say energy, really we're talking about more often than not emotions that have been stuck in the system, in the body.
And this all falls under energy healing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And what other things so you mentioned Reiki. Can you just explain a little bit what energy healing is to the best of your... I know.
Well, there's different types of energy healing, right? Like you can run energy through bodies, right? You can do it physically by touching, right? Like and a lot of times Reiki is laying hands where there are certain hand positions and you lay them on the body and it runs energy through the meridians. That is not what I do. You can also do that, though. Many people can do the same thing, and Reiki can do it at a distance. They can do it with their intention. And then what I do is more, it's energy work, and this is all just energy, but I'm going in and feeling, or maybe how I assess it or how I experience it is emotional. So I can go in and feel where certain emotions have been stuck or lying dormant, or they're really hot, or I can see other people's things like, ooh, you're carrying a whole load of somebody else's stuff, which we all do, that isn't serving you anymore and wants to go. And, it's just it's a system. We get backed up, right? Like if it's a 2-inch pipe and it's too big, it's not going to fit through. And so a lot of what I'm doing as a metaphor is cleaning out the debris so that the system can flow again through that pipe. And then we want to expand that 2-inch pipe and make it bigger so that we can expand capacity to hold more stuff, to hold more energy, to hold more emotion, so that we can process it on our own. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I know, energy healing is, and for me, I'm similar to you, Kim. Like, I just know what I feel. I know what I work. I don't really know the language for it a lot of times. It doesn't even matter. But I know sometimes for people listening, it's such new stuff, right? And energy healing, I know it's healing, right? We're working. It's a holistic practice, and it helps to restore. We're restoring balance, right? We're restoring balance in someone's energy field.
Yeah, for sure. Like all of these things are true. The how is really the more confusing bit, right? But yeah. we're it's restoring. Sometimes it's creating balance for the first time, depending on what people's pasts are and who raised them and in the environments they were born into. And sometimes we're really creating some of that from scratch.
Yeah, I love that. It's true. Yeah. And we're doing that usually on a physical, emotional, mental, for the spiritual to an emotional.
Absolutely. Like, I will say this. I do want to say this. So much of the time, especially in this kind of work, people are really focused on the how.
Yeah.
Just to go back to that for a second. But my argument is often when we're focused on how, as much as when we're all focused on the why of things, why did this happen to me, right? It's the same thing with the how. How does this work? How does this work? It's often a distraction. Because healing or changing, healing is scary, but really what it is change is scary. Because our subconscious, is our little lizard brain. Our lizard brain wants to keep us in the familiar. It doesn't care if you're happy. It doesn't care if you're comfortable. It doesn't care about anything. It just cares that you're alive. It's to keep you alive. And if your familiar place is a place of pain or suffering or whatever's going on with you, your subconscious isn't going to be super psyched about moving out of that place because the opposite of that or the lack of that is unfamiliar, and it's not sure that it knows how to survive in that.
Exactly.
So it causes real resistance. So we've all seen it in ourselves and in others, right? Like, I'm not dumb. Why do I keep doing this thing? Why do I not do the thing I know I need to do to move out of this uncomfortable place? Why do I keep sabotaging myself? It's because the subconscious is always going to drag you to the most familiar place because it knows it can keep you alive there.
Yeah.